On the night of Monday 15th November 1824, around 10 o'clock, the shout of fire was heard on the High Street in Edinburgh. Word spread quickly, and large crowds gathered and came from all areas of the city to watch the columns of smoke and flames that were coming from the second floor of a house at the head of Old Assembly Close. This was a workshop owned by Robert Kirkwood Jr., a well-known engraver, at 166 High Street. A pot of linseed oil had caught fire, and unable to contain it, it spread rapidly through the premises. The fire service, under Firemaster James Braidwood, was in its infancy, but engines came quickly, although it was another hour before they were able to tackle the blaze, as they found it difficult to find a water supply. By that time the whole building was alight, with the upper floors of the tenement, including 6 stories forming the east part of a row of buildings, ablaze. 2 tenements to the west also caught fire, and due to the narrowness of the old closes, it was impossible to work the engines properly. At this point it was feared that the Edinburgh Courant Office would be next, and it was. Its upper story caught fire just as some men got on the roof of the tenement and shouted to the firemen for a hose to douse the flames. However, their shouts weren't heard until it was too late. The whole tenement was lost, together with an extensive range of buildings in the old fish market and assembly closes. While these buildings were being destroyed, the night grew calm and still, and the sparks emitting from the flames shot skywards, falling to the ground like snowflakes. The sky turned a dusky red. Scores of high chimneys set on fire by the falling sparks compounded the disaster. The Tron Church was completely surrounded by these falling embers. At around 1 o'clock in the morning of the 16th, news of the fire was given to a house directly opposite, causing more fear and alarm that it would jump across the street. Meanwhile, the weather had changed. The wind had picked up and rain fell, but due to the heat, it was the wind that won, fanning the flames. By 5 o'clock, the fire had proceeded so far down in the building occupied by the Courant Office that the upper part of the front fell inwards with a crash, driving the flames into the middle of the street. By this time, news spread that houses on the east side of the old fish market close had burned down. Moreover, the building occupied by Abraham Thompson, a bookbinder which had been destroyed a few months previously by fire and rebuilt, was crushed by the fall of a gable end. In the old Assembly Close, it was more destructive. The whole west side, ending at the King's Old Stationery Warehouse, and including the old Assembly Hall, then occupied as a warehouse by Bell and Bradford booksellers, was entirely destroyed. These tenements had been inhabited by distinguished people, but were now just a pile of smouldering rubble. A great part of the southern land fell to the ground, but a tall pile of sidewall broken in the centre rested in its falling, forming half a huge pointed arch and remaining in that position for several days. By 9 o'clock, the steeple of the Tron Church was discovered to be on fire. The pyramid became a massive flame. Lead from the roof poured over the masonry in molten streams, and the bell fell with a crash, but the church was largely saved by a powerful engine belonging to the Board of Ordnance. The fire was stopped. However, a new one broke out in Parliament Square, in the attic floor of a tenement 11 stories high, overlooking the Cowgate. This fire was not in any way related, though. Some in the city claimed it was punishment sent from God on the people of the town for their sins. As the fire spread at St Giles and Parliament Square, the scene became more and more shocking due to the height of the tall buildings. All efforts were directed to saving Parliament House and the law courts, and by 5 on the Wednesday morning, the scene is said to have been unspeakably terrific. Huge columns of flames shot into the sky. The brown faces of the firemen were seen under their caps as their heads were raised at each successive stroke of the engines. Even the water looked like a stream of liquid fire. The county hall at one time appeared to be lit up like a palace, and the steeple of St Giles was said to have reared itself amid the bright flames like a spectre awakened to behold the fall and ruins of the devoted city. Among those present that night were the Lord President Charles Hope of Granton, the Lord Justice Clerk David Boyle of Shoaleton, the Lord Advocate Sir William Ray of St Catherine's, the Solicitor General John Hope, George Cranston, the Dean of Faculty, and Henry Coburn, later Lord Coburn. The Lord Advocate worked for some time on one of the engines, plying the central tenement at the head of the old Assembly Close with water, the first building he'd seen alight. On the Wednesday morning, although showers of sleet and hail fell, the fire continued to rage in Conn's Close, where burning embers had landed. On the High Street, 4 tenements of 6 stories high were destroyed, as well as the basements of these houses. In Conn's Close, 2 timbered historic lands were also destroyed, and in Old Assembly Close, 4 houses of 7 stories high were destroyed. In Borthwick's Close, 6 tenements, and in Old Fishmarket Close, 4 tenements of 6 stories each, were burned to the ground. Down as far as the Cowgate, all that could be seen were heaps of blackened ruins, with gaping windows and piles of smoking rubbish. In Parliament Square, 4 double tenements of from between 7 to 11 stories were also destroyed, and the incessant crash of falling walls made the surrounding area dangerous. Among other places of interest destroyed here was the shop of John Kay, a caricaturist. During Thursday, the authorities were occupied in the difficult task of examining the ruined buildings in Parliament Square. These being of colossal height and badly damaged, threatened the destruction of everything within their locality. One 11-story building was in such a dangerous condition that it was proposed to bring it down with cannon. On Friday, the ruins were inspected by Admiral Sir David Milne and Captain Francis Head, later Sir Francis Head, of the Royal Engineers, who reported on it, and he was tasked with the demolition of the buildings. In the meantime, offers of assistance came from Captain Hope of HMS Brisbane, then in Leith Roads, were accepted, and his crew of 40 threw a line over the high southern gable above Heron's Court, although only brought down a small portion of the building. Next day, Captain Hope returned, bringing with him iron cables, chains and ropes, while some sappers daringly undermined the eastern wall. These were sprung, and as had been predicted by the captain, the enormous mass fell almost perpendicularly to the ground. In all, 400 homes were lost, including the homes of some eminent Edinburgh men, and left hundreds homeless. 2 firefighters were killed and many people were injured. Braidwood and the fire service were blamed for the extent of the fire, but were exonerated by an inquiry into the disaster. The Tron church bell, which had hung in the church since 1673, partly melted in the heat of the fire and crashed through the blazing ruins of the steeple. Parts of it were made into quaichs and other similar items, memorials to the fire. As for the steeple, it was rebuilt a few years later, as was much of the south side of the High Street between it and Parliament Square. If you enjoyed this episode of Scotland's History, please like, comment and subscribe. Until next time, thank you for watching.